Absolutely. Yeah, so can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right, excellent. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. I am like Carrie said, I'm a client application developer, and as a consultant I I kind of work on the different types of applications that my clients need. On mobile apps, but when I do, I really enjoy it. So so yeah, there's a little bit about me. If you have access to the chat window, go ahead and type in there, like if you're calling in from a school, what school you go to, or what city you're in. That way, I can kind of get a feel for who you are, and we can get to know each other a little bit better. I also teach a few courses on Pluralsight. Some of this content that you're going to see today comes from so you can check out some of my other stuff there. What we'll be covering is this idea of composability. How it occurs in XAML and why it's important for a mobile application to have composability. So again, if you window, what is to you in the real world that is composable? Any one example that I hear quite a lot is Legos. With Legos you can build up any kind of structure that you can think of by just putting the pieces together, and you don't really know what that structure is going to be, that they fit together in so many different ways that you can use your imagination and you can really build whatever you want to achieve. And so we can do the same thing with a mobile application. We can use constructs, these different components, in different places. And these components have some really great benefits. They are independent of their container. So we can take one component, put it in different containers, and it would still act the same way. So it doesn't matter what container it's in. They are also isolated from their neighbors. So it doesn't really matter when you put these two components together, or if you put them on separate pages, they'll still behave in the way that they're supposed to. Be extended by putting other components inside of them. So this nesting helps us to build up a mobile application. And so from these different benefits of components, we get a lot of benefits to our application design. We know exactly where we need to go in order to make a change to an application, because there's one component that has that responsibility. And we know that when we go there to make that change, we're not going to be breaking something else because those other components are isolated. So I want to dive into a little bit more about leaving holes inside of a component. What does that mean in terms of XAML? So XAML is a markup language, really the way that we're going to be talking about XAML for building user interfaces. And so you can inject behavior into a component by building one user interface component and build the composition up that way. And you do that by creating things like data templates, control templates, and using the content control in order to place those things inside of your controls. And I'm going to show you some examples of how to do all that. So this is the idea of composability and how it's in XAML. Why is this really important for a mobile application? Well, it's because mobile, unlike the desktop and the laptop world before it, really comes in several different form factors. So on the tablet, you've got lots of real estate. You can look at all your components all in the same place. But then you might want to snap that application to the side and then use the main screen for some other application. When it's snapped, you can't show all of the components. You have to show just a subset. You want to make sure that those components that you show in the snapped view still work the same way. you don't want to have to reinvent all those components just to support a different way of looking at the app. On the phone, it on the surface looks an awful lot like the Snap application, and you can start there. But the phone has to always work in that format, so you have to be able to go from one page to another, and it's got different usage scenarios, and so you'll still want to have your components arranged in a slightly different way than even in the Snap view. So having all these different form factors, this is what makes it necessary to use composable structures in XAML. So we're going to dive into the first few set of composability patterns, and this is really going to kind of set the stage for how are we going to achieve composability, how are we going to use it in our applications. And so the first thing that we want to accomplish is to have balanced white space inside of our app. So if we start with this app that's got these 4 different components in it, and I just kind of put them onto the screen inside of a grid control, then there's no space in between them. It's much too crowded. So what I want to be sure to do is to allocate some space in between those components. But in between is not quite enough. I also have to make sure that the components push away from the boundaries so that I've got balanced white space all around my user interface. Now this sounds like something that it seems kind of wasteful, all this space for all these pixels not being used. But in fact, if you have an application, especially a mobile application that you're supposed to be able to glance at and use quickly, you need that white space in order to guide your eye around the surface. So that white space turns out to be pretty important. And so to balance that white space, one thing that that I see beginning developers do all the time is they'll lay out their grid and then they'll allocate some of the white space to some controls on one side, but not to other controls on the other. And this really gets you into trouble because now these components have to know exactly where they are in the grid in order for them to balance their white space. So what I like to do instead is to put those grid lines right down the middle. And now every component is contributing the same amount of white space no matter where it is in the grid. So let me show you how you can accomplish this using expression blend. If you're not familiar with blend, if you like to just do all your XAML in Visual Studio, I really encourage you go ahead and give yourself some time to really learn blend, because it really gives you an awful lot of tools that you just don't get in Visual Studio. So what we're going to look at here, first of all, this grid is the Windows 8 silhouette. So any Windows 8 application should have this kind of a structure at the top level. There's a style guide online that tells you that it should be 140 pixels to the top of the content here and 120 from the side, and that the title should be 100 pixels to the baseline. And so by setting up this grid, we can set up that silhouette, but now the components within the silhouette, notice here I've got them inside of another grid. And so you'll see I've got if I were to say dive into this control and go ahead and give it a back. Now you can kind of see its relation to the rest of the screen. I'll go ahead and zoom in here. You can see that it's coming right up to the edge, but the buttons inside of that control are not going right to the edge of that control. That way I'm able to allocate a little bit of white space around the buttons, and then because that white space is allocated within the buttons, then it kind of bubbles up. So the trick here is that every leaf control has the same amount of white space around it, but the containers go right to the edge. And what that allows me to do is to allocate half of the white space to each of the controls. If you are familiar with HTML, then you might be familiar with how it handles margins inside of a div. What it's going to do is when you've got two divs that are right next to each other, it's going to let those margins overlap. So the space between those two divs is going to be the maximum margin. And then when you get to the edges, what it does with those edges depends upon its display mode. But it doesn't work that way. It's just very simply going to add the margins together. So whenever I've got two components that are right next to each other, and they both have a certain amount of white space around them, then that they are both going to contribute half of the white space to what's in between them. And so when I have all these containers, like you can see, these big colored boxes are my user controls, and then inside of these are the leaf controls. So these are buttons. This would be a text area. This would be a list item. And so these are leaves within my visual tree. And since I put the white space around the leaves and not around the containers, now each of the leaves is pushing away and contributing half of the white space between it and its neighbors. And then to finish this out, you'll notice that right here the space between the buttons looks like a nice full space, but to the edge we're only seeing half of the space. Half of this space. So in order to get, what I really need to do is allocate another half of space to the outer container. And so that way I can balance the whole thing. So coming back to Blend, if you were to create a brand new project, just file new project and use a grid. So we're going to do a Windows Store grid app. Then the silhouette is laid out for you, and you'll see everything looks really nice. The problem that I have with this is right here. The control knows that it's right up next to the edge of that grid cell, and so this control isn't contributing any white space to the top. So its margin at the top is going to be 0. And that makes it really difficult to then move that control to a different part of the screen, because in a different part of the screen, so what I would have preferred to do is instead allocate half the white space, maybe 10 pixels, and then go ahead and move this line up 10 pixels. So it ends up in the right place, but now things are easier to move around. And so that's the simplest idea of composability. You make sure that your objects are isolated from their container, and they can work at any place within that container. When you are balancing your white space, sometimes you'll want to actually consume some of that area. So right here I've got a list of objects. I want to make sure that I can put the scroll bar into the white space. So let me flip back to my other project. And so in here, I'll go ahead and turn this background back to transparent. So right here I've got a list. And I want to make sure that scroll bar appears out here to the edge of the list. If I take a look at my edge, in order to balance my white space, part of my white space is coming from the controls inside, part from the controls outside. And so I want to make sure that the scroll bar shows up out here. Well, how am I actually? The this blue line is extending outside. The margin for this list box actually extends beyond the right-hand side. It overflows its container. So I'll come in here, here's the list view, and we'll look at the margin, and you'll see this margin here. It's perfectly legal to have negative margins, and those will overflow their container. They will leave. And that way, you can go ahead and allocate half your white space like you want to in order to make sure that things can move around, but then use a negative margin in order to overflow to move things out into the white space. And that way, when I do have a lot of things in this list and the scroll bar shows up, then it's going to show up kind of in that margin. It'll be right next to the edge, so I can hit it quickly with the mouse, and it'll work well. If I were to take this same list box, and if I were to move it to a different area of the screen, maybe I wanted the list box to appear in here, then that means now the scroll bar is going to be in this white space between the list box and these items over here. And while using negative margins for overflow, things are still going to line up appropriately, and they're isolated from one another and from their container. So this really helps me to lay things out. Now, when building a mobile application, or in fact any XAML application, but in particular mobile, it is really important that somebody should be able to what they want to accomplish rather than have to read some text or rather than have to go search for something. And so to recognition over recall, we'll put assets into our applications. And so these would be things that you could download from, say, this is one of my favorites. I've got some assets in here from Syncfusion. Sometimes if you need to draw one yourself, Inkscape is a great free tool, and you can save something as SVG, pull it straight into Blend, and now you've got a XAML asset. Or if you're in more professional areas, then you probably have Illustrator, and you can draw something in Adobe Illustrator, and again pull that into Blend, and you've got the XAML asset. Those assets is that you can then compose them into other controls. So the first thing that you need to do is separate your assets, put those into a separate part of your application. That way you can work on them as a designer. You are also the developer. So working on the visual assets, and then you put your developer hat on. They're over there where you can get access to them, but they're not cluttering up your code. We put them into a resource dictionary, and one thing that I like to do is to prefix the keys in that resource dictionary so that I know very quickly how to and then you merge those resource dictionaries into the application, and so then you can display them on the. So let me show you real quick. Let's flip back to Visual Studio, and you can see here I've got an assets folder. Now this contains my logos, but then it also has this one XAML file here. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And you can see this is a resource dictionary. So this resource dictionary has actually just a couple of different data templates. So these data templates then contain view boxes that have now all of these paths. Now I can't read this this path language. What I did was I used a tool called Syncfusion, and right here's or called Metro Studio from Syncfusion. So here's Metro Studio. I just went in here and found the so let's do a floppy disk, and then you can rotate and scale, and then display that as XAML. And so the path is all laid out for you. And it even puts this inside of a view box. So as a view box, this is really important for being able to use your assets at different scales inside of your application. So let me flip back to Visual Studio, and so you can see that's exactly where these assets came from. And they're inside of a view box so that I can use them inside of my applications. So the way that we're often going to organize our assets is we'll take these paths. This is me using Inkscape, so I'm not a very good artist. That's why I love Syncfusion. But we'll take our paths and we'll put them onto a canvas. In the example that we just looked at, I was using a grid, but canvas control works really well in cases where I want to have explicit control over where the points fall. And then wrap that canvas, and you can see parts of the paths can actually extend beyond the canvas, and that's perfectly fine. So it's just like with overflow. We know that the bounding area should be this particular canvas, so we create that rectangle with that canvas, and then whatever we put beyond its boundaries will still appear in our user interface. It'll just be in the white space. So again, we can use that technique. But now that it's inside of a view box, we can take that and put that into a content control, and we'll specify how far away it is from the edges of the content control and how big it is. And then it will take our paths and it will just simply draw that relative to that rectangle. So let me show how I've done that in this case. So here I am back in Blend. And by the way, quick blend technique. If I hit V, I've got my mouse cursor and I can select things. If I hit H, that turns it into a hand, and now I can pan around the screen. Control 0 pops it to full screen, and then scroll wheel to if you just learn those 4 things, Blend is going to be a lot easier to navigate. So here I've got a couple of buttons, and I pulled this this user group icon and this business card icon out of Syncfusion's Metro Studio, and exported those as resources inside of my assets folder. And so here I'm able to put them into these buttons. So I will get in there. So now you can see here's the button. It's all laid out inside of a grid, and if you'll notice, I've allocated 10 pixels around each button. So I've got 20 pixels of balanced white space around the buttons. And this grid is actually so that the top of the button appears at the top of the control. So if I look at the grid, if I pop out right here to this view, you can see right here is the -10. So now that causes the top of the button to line up with this guideline. So I'm using that overflow and the balanced white space in order to get things to line up, while still being able to take this button and move it around relative to the others. So now, since I've put that asset inside of a view box, if I were to change the size of the image changes in proportion. That is a great technique for just being able to grab the assets that you want. You don't know exactly how they're going to be used yet, so you keep them independent from their container. But by using a view box, no matter where you put them, they're going to look right. So let me take another closer look here at these assets. So we're back in Visual Studio. And you can see that I've prefixed that user group icon key with icon buttons dot. I have all of my different icon buttons inside of this one resource dictionary, and I'm not going to mix up the names with any other groups of assets. So there is no namespacing mechanism built into resource dictionaries. It would be really nice if I could call this resource dictionary icon buttons. I mean, it is called iconbuttons.xaml, but when I go to use one of these resources, there's no way to take this as a prefix to everything that's in there. So I have to manually assign this icon buttons prefix, organize things a little bit better myself. So, so flipping back to Blend real quick, you can see when I've got a button selected, I'm going to go down to, forget where it is. Let me go ahead and search for where that property is. It's called icon. There it is. It's in miscellaneous in this case. And so I've just gone ahead and done the search. You can see here I can choose a local resource, and now I've got my prefixed icon button names listed in my local resources. So they're all grouped together, and I can very quickly choose which icon button should appear on this particular button. So with that namespace prefixing, helps you stay organized, helps you keep your resource dictionary isolated from one another, so you can work on one without breaking the others. So the way that we are putting that asset into the button is with this content control. So let me show you how that actually works. I'm going to edit the template for this button, and you'll see right here are a couple of content presenters. So a content presenter is a control that's derived from content control, and what it does is it shows any content, anything that you want to pull from someplace else, and puts it here. The content control, or its derived class content presenter, that's how you put holes into your components that you can then fill in with. So here I've created a content presenter that I'm filling in with the asset. This other content presenter here, that gets filled in with the text. And so this template simply says, put something up here, put something else down there. Those are just simply two content presenters, a couple of holes that I can then fill in with any piece that I want. So that is how you would bring assets into your application by putting them into content controls. So now what if you want to, like we did with the icon button, what if you want to bring those components in that already has what you want? So in this case, at the time that I had created this sample application, Windows 8.1 or Windows 8 just had a button that you could set the text with content, but you could set the image with content, but the text had to come from some other property that was just really strange. Now with Windows 8.1, they have effectively what I've created here in the icon button, but it's still a good exercise. So let's pretend that this doesn't yet exist in Windows 8.1. So I have a button, and so I can simply drop a button on the page. And if I look at the controls over here, I'm still searching for the icon property, and there is no icon property. What I can set on a button is simply its content. So I can set the content to text, or like we saw before, I could set the content to a resource. Now in this case, it's just trying to show me the name of that resource. Yeah, so what it really should be, well, we'll get back to that in a second. But the important thing here is that there is only one place for me to put content. What I really need to do is to have a place to put the text and a place to put the image. So I need two holes in this control. And so what I did, if I flip back to Visual Studio, is I created this icon button. Here, this is derived from a button. So this is a button control. But it has more than a button. It has this extra dependency property right here. So we've created an icon property, called it icon. It exists inside of icon button. Any object. We're just simply using get value, set value in order to get and set that property. And that's it. That is the entire class. It inherits all of its behavior from the base class button. But what it does is it adds one more place where I can put something. It puts one more hole into a button. So now, rather than simply having a button like this, I can say I want you to be an icon button. And you are in the C: namespace. So lo and behold, now I've got a button that has two places, something up on the top and something up on the bottom. If I were to put some content in there, we can see right now it's showing up in both places. That's kind of strange, but now let's see why. If we come over here and look for icon, now I've got my icon property, and you can see it's blank. I don't have anything in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my icon to one of the resources, and so now you can see it's pulling that asset into the icon button and displaying that as the icon. So what I've done is I've created a class that has a dependency property which now leaves a hole that I can fill in from the outside. So I'm reusing this icon button. Now I've got 3 icon buttons. And each one, you can fill in that hole in a different way. Now I want to dive into how we're linking up that icon property to this to where it appears on the screen. So if I were to go to Edit Template, and by the way, this Edit Template feature, that's something that's really hard to do in Visual Studio. Blend makes that just incredibly easy. So that's one of those reasons that you want to learn Blend. But now you can see here the template for an icon button has a view box. So I'm taking whatever this object is and I'm making sure that it stays the same proportions even though I change the size. And this guy, he's really just an ellipse. And that ellipse represents the border of the button. And then I've got my different focus visuals, and then here are those 2 content presenters. So if I clear the search, you can now see the presenter, its content. It's got a gold bar around it saying that there's some kind of binding going on. So you can see the gold bar, and that refers to the fact that this is using a template binding. The template binding, and you can see all of these different properties. Every option in here is a property of an icon button, and most of these are inherited from its base class button. And so you can see this is using template binding, so it's binding to the content property of the button class. So if I were to look at this content presenter, then okay, there we go. then the way that I've attached this one is, let me flip back here. Each one is a data template. So each of the different buttons actually is a template now that I can set. So here I'm not setting the content property. What I'm setting is the content template. So I can again look at template binding, and you can see that this is bound to I was expecting actually to see the list of controls. So in this one case, Blend is actually tricking me a little bit. Let me go ahead and view that right here. This content presenter's content template is bound to the icon property using template binding. So that's really the important part there. So I've defined the icon property, and the icon property should be set to some kind of a data template. And so then this control template is saying, make that the content template for this content presenter. So lots of templates going on there, but you can see how each one is solving one of those problems of composition, where one of the templates is so that we can put it into a resource dictionary, and then this control template is so that I can take that whole and I can fill it in some kind of property. Okay, so then control extension, let's kind of walk through what we just saw. We created at first a button, and the button template said that I should have a content presenter that shows the button's content property. So you can see this box right here, this represents the property of the button. And then this button template is going to have a content presenter that displays that. But that wasn't enough holes, so what I had to do was so first of all, from the container, I could create a button and set the content property, and then the button template would display what was in that property. But if I want more holes, more places to put content, then I create a derived class. There's my icon button, and this inherits the button property of content, but then it also creates its own property, icon. And so now from the container, I can create an icon button, and then I can set the content and the icon. And then my icon button template will pull in the icon property and display that at the appropriate place. Now, in order to make the icon template pull things in and show them in the right place, right here I've got, so let's start right here with my app XAML. I've first of all merged in my resource dictionary for my icon buttons. And I also merged in a resource dictionary called themes.xaml. And so themes, this is where I set up a style that targets the icon button class. So this style is going to be applied anywhere it sees an icon button. And so right here we can see that it's setting the template for that icon button. And this is where we saw that content presenter that was bringing in the icon. So there's an awful lot of XAML that I didn't have to write myself. All I had to do was right-click on the button and then say I wanted to create a new template for this control. And it pulled this out and created all these places for me to start adding all of this XAML. And that's how I was able to achieve that effect, and do so in a way that allowed me to reuse that button, but put those that icon property and display them in the right place. So that I find to be a really powerful composition mechanism. Now, the last of the patterns that I want to talk about today are related to data templates. So let's suppose that in this particular application, I've got a list box that's showing a list of activities. So let me come back out here to my control 0, and now I'm back to full screen. So here I'm showing a list of activities. So these are all the things that I've done throughout this this quarter. So I did a phone screen and an interview. I spoke at a user group. I presented a lunch and learn. So these are all my different activities. And you can see that the different activities fall into different categories. I want to be able to display that to the user. So I've got my activity collection, and this is going to be in my view model. And then different types of activities. I've got my recruiting activities, user group activities, and business development activities. And so I want to show a different control. So I've got my recruiting activity control, user group activity control, business development activity control. I look here, here's my set of controls. I've got a different control for each one. So that means that not only can the color change, like I'm showing with this example, but I can even show different properties. So for example, for a user group, if I were to view the source, you would see right here, this text block shows the name of the user group. The others show the date and the description. So that only makes sense for a user group. For a recruiting activity, I'm going to view the source here. Oops. Here we go. And you can see that now this text box is showing me the candidate. So I'm using the same basic look and feel, but just putting different parts of my derived classes into those objects. So I'm changing the data binding based on the type. And so again, this is a composability feature because now I can change the way that recruiting activity is displayed without affecting how a user group activity is displayed. So my components are isolated from their neighbors. And that means I can change things without breaking other things. So the way that I was able to select the appropriate control is through a data template. So let me, again, flip back to Visual Studio. And we will dive into the feed view. So this is showing the feed of all of my. And so here is the list view. And you can see that it has an item template selector. So this item template selector is going to select which of the item templates am I going to use for this particular activity. So let me see, what is this implicit data template selector? And you can see that I've created it right here inside of my resources. And this is an instance of that class. So let me jump to implicit data template selector. And you can see that what this is doing is it is selecting a template based on its type. So I'm going to take my item and I'm going to get the type of that particular item. And then I'm going to use that type name to look up a resource inside of my resource dictionary, looking through the different parents within my logical tree. So starting at this control, I'm going to look at its resources. If I don't find it there, I'll jump out to its parent, and then to its parent, and so on, until I get to the application, and I'll look for application resources. But I'm only looking for resources that have the same name as the type that I'm trying to display. So, jumping back to my XAML, you'll see the next set of resources right here are business development activity, recruiting activity, and user group activity. So these data templates simply contain those controls, nothing else, nothing more. So with that pattern, I'm able to quickly select which control to display for which type of activity. So I simply data bind that list of activities to the view model, fill it up with the right types, and then they show up appropriately on the screen. And so using that pattern, I'm able to display this heterogeneous list, but be able to work on each of the individual controls and data bind them to their appropriate types and the properties that are exposed by those types. And so I can work on one type without impacting the others. So, kind of wrapping this up, the benefits of composability, especially within a mobile application, is that we can isolate our components from one another. So the components are isolated from their containers, so that they act the same no matter what container they're in, and they're isolated from the neighbors. So it doesn't matter if a component is sitting next to another component. If I'm being composable, then they'll still behave the same way no matter who their neighbors are. And then this helps me to organize my application. So I can put my assets in one place, and when I'm acting as a designer, I can work on those, and then I have access to them inside of the rest of my application when I'm acting as a developer. And then now I've got extensibility, where I can take a component, put a hole in it using a content presenter, and then I can fill it in with any components that I want to. And so some of the patterns that we looked at in order to achieve these things were using the grid layout, so that I pushed away from the boundaries of the grid by putting the margins on my leaf controls, not on the containers. And so that gave me balanced white space, especially when I put some extra white space around the outside container. And then I could overflow by setting negative margins and get some parts of my control into the white space. And then with the assets pattern, I'm able to pull assets into my various controls. And then using the control templates, I'm able to, and especially with the control extensions, I'm able to tell the visual, I'm able to tell XAML where those properties are supposed to appear. And then finally, the implicit data templates allows me to select different templates by their type. And I think I saw a question that somebody was trying to post. So go ahead and if you have a question, you can unmute and ask away. Because yeah, I'm afraid with me running full screen like this, I can't see the history.
Hey, Michael, it's Carrie. Yeah,
yes.
Actually, there were a couple of questions, but there's a few people that don't have audio. So one of our students was talking about the difficulty of controlling this coding on the phone. I'm not exactly sure what he was referring to, so I'm going to let him rephrase. Okay. Yeah, Mohammed, if you could, do you know what he's talking about?
Well, that did remind me. There is one other aspect of this demo that I did want to show, and that might answer that question. So, so back here in Blend, let me go ahead and close all these down. Okay, let me go ahead and run this application, and you'll see that it brings up this list. We've got our buttons. Now I can take this and I can snap it. See, are we still seeing the screen? Looks like I might have done something to.
No, yeah, we can't see it anymore.
Yeah, something to mess up the screen sharing. Let me go ahead and reshare that. And in the meantime, if you do have audio, you can go ahead and unmute and clarify that question.
Yeah, waiting on that one. But we do have another question. I'm going to look this up for you, sorry. But do you happen to know if the controls and the templates are listed somewhere handy, somewhere like an MSDN? And I'll also look up this information.
Oh, yeah, there's actually there's a great site. It's not Connect. It's what do they call that? There's you might remember this site where you've got some designer training materials and then developer training materials.
Oh, Microsoft Virtual Academy?
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, okay. I was thinking that there was a name for it that just had a C, but yeah, maybe that was what I was thinking of. So yeah, with the plenty of examples there that had that kind of walked you through the different the different ways that you could use templates. Yeah, MSDN is of course a really good resource in this area. And yeah, trying to think. Yeah, if you have a Pluralsight subscription, my course XAML patterns, I go through the various types of templates. But yeah, those would be 3 places for that information.
Okay, and now I'm understanding Mohammed's question. He wants to know if we're going to be working with mobile.
Right. Okay. So yeah, this example here is a Windows 8 application. So this was designed for tablets. I didn't want to try to show both a tablet and a phone application at the same time. That would probably be a little bit too much flipping back and forth. But that brings up what you can do here is snap this. Now you can see the layout is different. And so if I were to build a phone application, then I would use a layout similar to this. Now I would have some other things like here on the bottom. I would have my icons always visible, as opposed to being hidden inside of a drawer. But this idea of being able to move your components into different areas, that has really helped me when building tablet and mobile applications and phone applications. I consider both of those to be mobile. The way that that's really helped is that I find that whenever I'm building a mobile application, there's multiple use cases for it. There are some times when you just quickly want to pull out your phone and interact with the application. And there are other times where you want to really sit down and work with the data. And so there you can pull out your tablet. And so application just on two different form factors. And so it should have the same sets of controls. You should have the same sets of features on those. Based on the form factor, you should be able to move those controls into different areas.
Okay, one follow-up question. So the screen space introduced by Windows 8 differs from the screen space for the mobile, though.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, there will be like in this example, you can see that when I'm full screen here, there's a certain silhouette, like we talked about, where this should be 120 pixels this way, 140 pixels this way. When I'm snapped, now I've chosen a different orientation. So I've put the same components, but just I've changed the spacing between them. I'm not sure if that's precisely what let me kind of show right here in code. If I were to dive into this view, you can see right here I'm just simply taking the size changed method. It doesn't look like my. There it goes. And the screen was taking a while to update. So yeah, so here I'm handling the size changed method, and so for a narrow orientation, I am going to show the full control and snap and hide the snapped control, and vice versa. So looking at that XAML more closely, you can see that this is actually made up of two grids. So here's my full grid, and then this other one is my snapped grid. You can see that I've really just got design time hidden set to true so that I can work with one or the other, but these simply contain the same set of controls. So this contains my feed view and file and ticker view.
Okay, so, sorry, Jen, I'll jump in with another follow-up comment. So can you control the different screens on the phone?
Yeah, so each one of these a separate page, and then I would just simply drop the appropriate each one of those pages. So so yeah, with the phone you can't do, but I found that when you're building, the more you can put into portable class libraries and share between the tablet and the phone, the better off you're going to be. So so this way you can reuse those controls, and then you just put them onto different pages in different orientations based on what kind of form factor you're on. So, yeah, I hope that that answers that question. I had forgotten that I put that little feature into the application here, and specifically to show why composability is so important when it comes to a mobile application, because your screen size is going to change, your use case is going to change, but you still want to be able to reuse your components.
Okay, and do you have any demos on the phone?
Here is just this is just on the tablet. So.
Oh, just on the tablet. Okay.
Right.
Will you have any demos for the phone?
Right. So let's see. Did we have any other questions that we wanted to cover?
We might. We have a few people typing.
Okay.
Okay, nope, that wasn't a question. All right. Go ahead.
Okay. Let's see. So I was yeah, I was thinking that it would take a bit longer to get through this. So so that is just about at 1 hour.
All right.
There,
Well, great. Well, we do have someone typing right now. We may have another question.
okay, great.
But, oh, Sori just mentioned that the theme is amazing, that she really loves Blend. All right, well, that's great. Well, if no other
Yeah.
questions come
Yeah,
in.
let me show you that.
Oh, okay.
Whenever I get a chance to kind of show off Blend, yeah, there are a few things that I really. So we looked at a couple of those already. Being able to flip between the hand and the selector, zoom in, zoom out, control 0 to snap. But then there. Yeah, some of the things that we didn't really get a chance to look at, like here, the templates. Let me dive into, here's the list view. So we had looked at, so you can do that with any type of control. Like here, I can edit the template of a list view. So I've got a scroll viewer and some kind of items presenter inside of it, and I can change the way that that my list viewer works. You know, like one simple way to do that orientation. That was the wrong one. So if I were to come back out here. Here's an additional template. This is my item container panel. So let's edit that. And now here's my item container. Okay, I'm missing which one it was I was looking for, but you can. Okay, yeah, it's the items panel that actually that I was looking for. And you'll come in here and you'll edit the generated items template. So you'll specify how each of the different items within that template looks. In this case, we've already done that with the data templates that I showed you. This one right here, the items panel, this is where now here a stack panel. So I can do things like change the orientation horizontal. And now I've got a horizontal list box. So these are all things that are possible by changing the template. And using Blend, that's a really easy, because you've got all of your different options right here across the top.
Great. And another question. So can you explain the composition of animations?
Yeah. Oh.
And storyboard as well?
Okay, so let's go ahead and do one real quick. I'm going to a new page. Well, let's go ahead and do this in user control. So I'll start with, I've got a, I'll just draw a quick path. All right, so I've got my arrow there. And what I'm going to want to do is animate this to kind of rotate. So we can simply go into our Visual State Manager, and I can assign some various states. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to animate the transform. So I'm going to be animating my rotation transform to make this arrow rotate into different angles. So I'll create my visual state group. And then here I'll add the state. And south. And west. So at these various states, I'm going to want to set the rotation angle. Then east would be 90 degrees, and west would be. So now I can simply turn on my animation preview, and you can see, well, it's not really animating yet. It's because my default transition is 0 seconds. Let's set that to 0. See that it's animating from one to the other. But here's where kind of the composability to go from north to west. I know that was kind of hard to see over the screen share, but that's actually rotating around. Here, let me slow it down a bit. Rotating around through all of the other angles of the circle. So what I want to do is to be able to have this appropriately without having to really mess up all of the other all of the other points. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a specific transition from north to west. So from here, that animation, you can see now here we are at the storyboard, it's animating the rotation of this row and going to 270. Well, if I instead change that to go to -90, now it's going to rotate in the other direction. So now let's go ahead and see what that looks like if I go from north to west. Now it's rotating the way that I want it to. To north, oops, that's going back through the circle again. So again, west to north, come in here to this animation, and this should go to the from isn't actually, and we want it to go to 360. So west to north, north to west, and so here by adding specific areas within my animation, I can tweak things without having to go in and mess everything else up. So so I find that this is a really good technique for kind of composing animations out of different visual states.
Great, thank you. So, does anyone have any other questions or follow-up comments, or would you like to see anything else? Okay, you're getting feedback now. That was great. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, one more thing on the storyboard here is that I find it very useful to bind my visual states to the way that you want in the code behind to say state. Well, there's a using behaviors in order to bind that state to the view model so that when the view model changes, then the screen animates. Again, is isolate things so that you can compose the behavior of the view model.
And also, can you animate by words? Can you make animations by words?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely, yeah. Every object that you draw, you could also change the properties of. So, create a text block. And one of the do when I'm trying to figure out the properties to make sure I get the effect that I want. And make this text bigger. And now, to kind of move around this, that's going to be translation. So that's what my translate X is going to do. That's what my translate Y is going to do. Change the angle. I can flip things around. The different. You can scale the X and the Y independently. You can even skew to kind of get. So I'll use this to kind of figure out. I kind of call this a tree, where I'm just pretending a puppet and the effect that I want. So if I want my name to just kind of bounce back and forth, then that's what I'm going to do with another visual state group, and say on the left, and I want that to be on the right. So left, I'm just going to change the render transform on the right, and now by setting a delay, I can animate between those two states. So yeah, you can animate any of the properties that you can data bind to. One is they are either discrete values or doubles, something that you can change through a continuum. The actual on the text, that's a that you could animate through. So for that sort of thing, you would want to have something in your view model that's changing, updating the text.
Great. Well, it looks like all the questions have come in, unless anyone has another question they want to type in. All right, well, looks like we've got them all asked and answered. Thank you so much. Michael, why don't you and I stay on the chat box for another 10 minutes or so, but we'll officially call this a successful and great presentation. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you to all the guests who took the time to come out
really
and learn.
Fun.
Yeah, this has been great. And you have on screen the way to reach Michael if you would like to, and you can also contact the MVP Mentor program as well. You can email us at mvpmentor@microsoft.com, or you can find us, Microsoft MVP Mentor, on Facebook and Twitter. So again, thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you, Michael, for a great presentation. Have a good night or early evening wherever you are. Thank you.